Hey, this is the C&D channel. I'm Chris, and this is MMA for you. I'm going to be doing my post-fight analysis for UFC 131. But before I get into that, I'd like to thank my sponsors, GoBusiness123.com and DeMarcus Sunglasses Boutique in Laguna Beach. Please support your local mom and pop shops. Let's get right to it. I'll start with the prelims and go on to the main card. One thing about this card, man, the judging was just terrible. I was just in disbelief. I don't know if it's something with Canada or something, but I was watching MFC on Friday, and Robert Washington fought Curtis DeMark. Washington totally won the fight, and it was clearly obvious, and somehow the judges gave it to Curtis DeMark. Even gave Curtis DeMark a 30-27 when it was clear that Robert Washington got at least one round. I mean, I think he got all 3 rounds personally, but somehow Curtis DeMark got the nod. It was just unbelievable. And speaking of unbelievable judging, we have Michihiro beating Darren Elkins. Well, actually, it's Darren Elkins beating Omigawa by unanimous decision when Omigawa clearly had rounds 2 and 3 in this fight. I don't know if it's something also with Japanese fighters getting introduced into the UFC or something, as Ricky Fukuda lost against Nick Ring, who Nick Ring looked really good in his fight against James Head, by the way. But it's weird to see these Japanese fighters getting these terrible decisions. Good to know that Omigawa got his win bonus, and Dana White feels that he totally won the fight. So it's not, even though despite losing 2 in a row, it doesn't look like Omigawa's gonna get cut. Good win by Elkins, I guess. I mean, he keeps winning. He keeps winning. I think he fought Ludwig, and Ludwig lost by injury. So it's no fault of Elkins, really. He has no control over this or anything, but it's kind of unfortunate that he's winning in what looks to be tainted victories, Is he someone to look out for in the 145 division? Tough to say, He looks like he'll be kind of like a mid-lead fighter, to be perfectly honest. Omigawa, he's not going to beat the top guys. I think wrestling's really going to hurt him in the 145 division in the UFC as well. He's always going to be a very game fighter, so good for him. I always enjoy watching Omigawa fight. Next fight after that, we had Joey Beltran fighting Aaron Rosa by TKO. Another story of this UFC was Joe Rogan's commentary, and he seemed to be dazzled by some mediocre things. It's kind of he's throwing these punches and then throwing a kick, throwing these punches from away, but as a diversion and or a feint, and throwing this kick in, and he was really impressed with Shane Carwin's kicks on Junior Dos Santos, and you're just it just seems like he has a tendency, and I love Joe Rogan, I really do. People who hate him, I don't know why. I mean, yeah, he doesn't always say the best thing, there are some things you can put him to task for, but for the most part, I love the guy. I think he's a great staple in the UFC, and if he were gone, I would honestly miss hearing him. I really would. As far as this fight goes, it was pretty sloppy. They would stand. So there were times they were standing, just toe to toe against each other, and just throwing left and right straight crosses. They were really square with each other. They're both really tough. They're not that technically great. It was an entertaining bout if you just like those type of brawls. And I think I would like to see Joey Beltran honestly fight like Dave Herman next. If you give Aaron Rosa, John Olaf next, that'd be a good fight as well. There's not much to really say. It's just, yeah, the two lower tier UFC heavyweights. Then honestly, I know Rosa's fought at light heavyweight, and Beltran looks like he can cut to light heavyweight as well. It kind of looks like both these guys are just blown up light heavyweights. Okay, next fight after that, we have Dustin Poirier beating Jason Young by unanimous decision. This fight was a lot closer than the judges' scorecards indicated. Poirier looked good. However, he doesn't need to work on checking leg kicks. Young in the second round was really finding leg kicks, and that is definitely something that Poirier should work on. I think he is a prospect to look out for. He's still really young and really getting his groove and finding his rhythm in the cage. Okay, next fight after that, we have Nick Ring beating James Head by a rear naked choke. I actually picked against Nick Ring in this fight, feeling that he didn't look good in the Fukuda fight, but he looked really good here. James Head had no takedown defense, no answer for the takedowns, and the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of Nick Ring. There was a scare in the beginning with Nick Ring in the first round as he got dropped. But for the most part, Nick Ring just dominated here. Got the rear naked choke without hooks in. So it was a very good win, and a really good showing by Nick Ring, who is undefeated in the UFC. As far as someone to look out for as a prospect, Nick Ring, like Chris Weidman, is another middleweight who fought today and looked fantastic. He's a prospect to look out for. Nick Ring, to me personally, and you know, it's totally argumentative. You know, obviously it's just my opinion here. He comes off like a prospect with a ceiling. You know, it's hard to say if he'll even break into the top 10. I think Nick Ring should be fighting some other lower tier fighters at this point. Not someone who's coming off a loss like Jesse Bongfeld or anything like that. Maybe like Ed Herman or something like that, or maybe even Chris Weidman to get Ed Herman, or Tim Bosch maybe. But yeah, Nick Ring, I think he should fight more lower tier, maybe some mid tier guys after this. Next fight after that, Krzysztof Szczecinski beat Mike Mazzengio by unanimous decision. That's all Krzysztof Szczecinski. Mazzengio has a nice but one-dimensional takedown game. He doesn't really set up his takedowns, but they're really quick. I mean, he'd like duck under punches or whatnot, and just immediately be on the, have his head on the guy's chest like right away. Mike Mazzengio is obviously in the weight. He's a blown-up middleweight. The guy should be fighting middleweights. And Krzysztof Szczecinski looked huge compared to Mazzengio in this fight, and it showed. Szczecinski's always going to come off to me like that mid-tier fighter. He's split fights with Stephan Bonner. He looks like a guy that should be fighting the Igor Prokopiaks or Anthony Parashas of the world. And it's not a shot on Szczecinski. I like him as a fighter. It's just that as far as his career in the UFC goes, from my perception, it just kind of looks like he's like a mid-tier for life. He's in what I call mid-tier purgatory in the light heavyweight division. And that's fine. That's fine. Some fighters, just aren't going to make it in the top 10. And quite frankly, some fighters aren't even going to make it in the UFC. So, I mean, this isn't really a knock on him. This is just how I perceive Krzysztof. Next fight of the night, and we got the submission of the night here as Chris Weidman beat Jesse Bongfeld by a standing guillotine. Weidman does need to work on his stand-up defense. He was getting hit by Bongfeld, and actually before he got the takedown, he got hit hard by one of Bongfeld's strikes. Weidman looks like he integrates Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu really well with his stand-up game, which I really like. And he's definitely just a prospect to look out for. He fights at a very high level here, and yeah, he looked good. He's someone to look out for. I'm thinking if you want to give him someone, I know Court McGee is gonna fight, and I forgot who he's fighting, but the winner of his fight versus Weidman would be good. Maybe Tim Bosch. If you want to give him Nick Ring, it does make sense to me. But yeah, there's some. Weidman is just someone to look out for in the middleweight division. Definitely one of the top prospects in the division. Next fight after that, we had Sam the Hands of Stone Stout finally getting his first KO victory in the UFC against Eve, the master of Thug Jitsu, Edwards. I really hate to see Eve Edwards lose. I really hate to see him lose in this way. But, you know, Sam Stout just hit him on the button with a beautiful, I believe it was a left hook, if I'm not mistaken. Stout's one of those guys, he's still young, but he's improving, but similar to like Krzysztof Szynski, he's been in the UFC for a long time now. He's lost to guys like Jeremy Stevens, but he's actually he pulls these win streaks and then he'll lose. And it's so tough to say with Sam Stout where he is in the division. Like, is he someone to look out for? Is he someone that's going to break into the top 10? Or is he going to be like a mid-tier fighter for life? I'd like to see him maybe against someone like Jason Tebow, who I think will just take him down all day, every day. Honestly, I'm going to be honest, he seems like Tebow, too, where it's just kind of like he'll get these win streaks and then suddenly lose. And he seems like that mid-tier for life type fighter. Those guys, he'll beat some guys that are really good, or that are other good mid-tier lightweights, but he can't seem to break into that top 10. That's kind of how I see Sam Stout. Eve Edwards, I mean, he beat Cody McKenzie. He won it. He's 2-1 to UFC. He can beat UFC caliber fighters, but mainly like the lower tier guys. I always liked the guy, but you know, as far as upward mobility, it's just not there anymore. You know, and I really like him. I enjoy, but he's a guy I enjoy watching, seeing his fights. He's a guy that can test prospects for sure. He has a lot of veteran savvy. But yeah, you know, he's definitely reached a point where, you know, he can only go so far, which is fine. You know, like I said, it's similar to Krzysztof. You know, some guys will just reach a point, and it's fine. I love Eve Edwards. You know, I will usually pick for him on an emotional pick. So yeah. And next fight after that, we saw Donald Cerrone dominate in a unanimous decision win against Wagner Roca. Wagner Roca is not a UFC caliber fighter. I mean, that's all I can really say about him. If they want it, you know, he took the fight on short notice, so they might give him a fight. But honestly, he's cuttable. He's just not ready. Donald Cerrone, he looked really good with his leg kicks. With his kicks in general. One thing that one of my buddies who did some amateur boxing said is Donald Cerrone, as good as his kicks look a lot better than his hands. From Cerrone, I saw a lot of just like basic 1-2 combos, but his kicks are the things that really stood out. I'd like to see Cerrone fight Sam Stout. Would be a really good fight, or Mac Danzig. There's some good fights for him, for sure. Next fight after that, Dave Herman got the fight of the night, along with John Olav Enema. Herman's a guy that I think after the first round, his corner said you have to try harder. The guy just does it, and I said it kind of in my predictions. He doesn't take fighting seriously or MMA as seriously as he needs to, and he looks like a guy that has the skill to do well. He won with like a knee left hook combo. That was really nicely placed. John Olaf, he's training with Golden Glory, which is a good gym. He seems to have power, but his technique's really not there. He's like 36. There's not much upside for him. The heavyweight division is really small, so I can imagine him getting another fight. But, I don't see much for him in his UFC future. Dave Herman, I'd like to see him fight Joey Beltran just because Joey Beltran's not going to give up. Whereas Dave Herman, you're questioning whether he will give up or not. I like Dave Herman. He seems like a fun fighter. He does have upside, but I also worry for him as well, as he doesn't seem to take MMA as seriously. As shown, he'd get punched, and then he'd smile. He'd back himself up against a cage, bounce off the cage, and he'd just smile, and they're just kind of like, you just don't get this impression he's taking it very seriously. Next fight after that, which also, this fight had questionable judging, as Mark Munoz beat Damian Maia by unanimous decision. The thing that was questionable was that one judge gave Munoz 30-27 when Damian Maia clearly won round 1. I believe Fight Metric gave this fight a draw. This was a great fight. This was my fight of the night. Damian Maia's stand-up looked really good. However, he couldn't keep up the technical skill, and he got sloppy as the rounds went on. Mark Munoz, he looked really good. His wrestling finally showed in this fight, especially his defensive wrestling. That guy would keep a sprawl on Maia forever, man. It was really good. Maia could not keep him down, or just couldn't take him down. In the third round, I think Maia did get the cleaner punches. I do feel Maia should have won the fight. I know Munoz got like 2 takedowns, and I think that kind of sealed it for him, even though he didn't really do anything with them. Maia got that crucifix from the back. I think he was landing the cleaner punches in the third round. Munoz got the second round. But this was a fight. If you gave it to Munoz, it's fine. It's not a robbery whatsoever. That third round was any man's game. It was just a great fight. You saw Maia going for the takedown. Munoz would sprawl and just keep that sprawl forever, and Maia would be forced to pull guard, and even then he'd have a hard time pulling guard. It was just a great technical fight, and great stuff. As far as Munoz's upward progression, he finally beat a top 10 opponent in middleweight. I feel that he should be fighting Brian Stann now. However, I'm still not sold on him as like that much of a contender, to be honest. His stand-up still looks pretty sloppy. I think if he fought Stann, he could win, possibly do with wrestling, but I think he'd get killed in the stand-up, to be honest. Maia, this was a great showing from him. Many felt that he should have won, or it should have been a draw. I think he should definitely still be fighting around the top of the division. I think if Alan Belcher wins his fight against Jason McDonald, Maia versus Belcher would be really cool. If you want to give him the winner of Bisping versus Jason Mayhem Miller, that's a good fight for him as well. There's some good fights for him near the top of the division. If you want to give him some mid-tier guys again, hey, there's some guys for him to fight there as well. Okay, next fight after that was the co-main event, as Kenny Florian beat Diego Nunez by unanimous decision. Also, there's a scorecard here that was 30-27 for Florian, when Nunez should have easily got round 1. Kenny Florian looked good at featherweight. I don't think this was the best that we've seen of Florian in featherweight. However, this fight didn't give me confidence that he'd be much of a threat to Aldo. I think he'd put up a fight against Aldo, but there's nothing in this fight that shows me that he'd like beat him or really be a factor or have anything for Aldo. Nunez he showed toughness throughout the fight. He even got a couple takedowns on Florian, which makes me wonder about Kenny Florian's wrestling game, even at featherweight. But yeah, good showing. I think Nunes, he throws a lot of those spinning strikes, which really tires him out. This was a pretty torrid pace too. The pace of this fight was really good. And something I got to say about the card overall, there was a lot of decisions, but this was a really fun card. A lot of these fights are really back and forth. The pace of a lot of these fights were really good too. A lot of constant action, not a lot of like lane play or wall install or anything like that. Florian showed that he definitely had the experience edge over Nunes, getting the takedowns, hitting him with elbows and whatnot. So yeah, Florian definitely looked good in this fight, and so did Nunes. Nunes is definitely a learning experience for him. I feel that Nunes should actually still keep fighting more at the top of the division. Kenny Florian looks like he's in line for a title shot against Jose Aldo. I feel Chad Mendes is more of deserves it more, but it is what it is. Kenny Florian is much more well known in the featherweight division, and he has a win over top 10. I just feel that Kenny Florian will more than likely get the title shot over Chad Mendes against Jose Aldo. Okay, and the final fight of the night, we saw Junior Dos Santos outclass Shane Carwin to a unanimous decision. Carwin showed a lot of heart in this fight. He was coming off a long layoff, similar to Dos Santos, but he was coming off surgery. Junior Dos Santos, name of the game here was the jab. He showed a great jab, left hook, and just showed a lot of range. And I'm really looking forward to Dos Santos versus Velasquez. It's not really much else I can really say, but I'm really looking forward to that fight. So yeah, that's it for my post-fight analysis for UFC 131, and that's it for MMA for you. Thank you very much.